Alright, today we'll be taking a look at what I would definitely consider to be the best Nikon DSLR you could get for under $700 US. And that would be the D5100. Now, if you're looking into getting a cheaper Nikon or just a cheaper DSLR in general, why should you pick the D5100? Now, one of the more common cameras people will buy is from the D3000 line, and that's the D3000, D3100, 3200, and of course the 3300. Now, why would you want to buy the D5100 instead of those? Well, one of the reasons why people might at this point want to avoid the D5100 instead of, say, the D32 or 3300 is it actually has a bit less megapixels. Now, if you're just a beginner, kind of the misconception going around is that more megapixels means better pictures, and that really isn't true. The more megapixels you have, the bigger possible picture you can make. And 16 is more than enough. Some people say that 24 could even be too much, which is what is on the 32 and 3300. So the fact that this has less megapixels than those cameras should definitely not deter you at all from looking into this camera. So even though it has less megapixels, I find that the image quality is noticeably better. So, megapixels really don't matter all that much. There are much more important aspects to a camera that really will make or break it when it comes to who has the better picture. One of the things I really enjoy about this camera that really fails to be mentioned is the variety of ISOs. And not to say that it has this incredible ISO range, but if you compare it to Canon, Canon has ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, 6400, 1600, and so on, for some of its more entry-level models. So those are the only ISOs you get. So you get a decent range, but, there's not very much in between those. Whereas if you compare it onto this, and on this camera, you actually have a lot more detail in the ISO. As you see, you have 125, 160, 200, 250, 320, 400, 500, 640, and so on and so forth. So even though it has the same ISO range, you do get a lot more variety in which ISOs you could choose, and you never know, that really could make or break the shot. Now, another thing people like, which I don't necessarily think is all that important, but a lot of people like that, is the fully articulating screen. Now, I personally don't think it's a huge deal. I have no problem with the fixed screens on some other cameras, but a lot of people really enjoy this for both still and videography. So, if that's something that is important to you, definitely keep that in mind, because the D3100 and all the D3000 line cameras do not have an articulating screen. So if you're someone who definitely wants that, this is the cheapest Nikon I'm aware of that actually has the articulating screen. Now, one of the most important things about any DSLR today is the video abilities. And the video on the D5100 is just so much better than that of any of the D3000 line cameras. And that's, like I said, the D3100, 3200, 3000, and of course the 3300. All of those, the videos just don't look nearly as good as they do on the D5100. So even though the two of those, the D32 and 3300, even though they're slightly more expensive than this, the video really does not look as good. I mean, it just blows the other Nikons in the price range just out of the water. Now, don't get me wrong, there are better DSLRs for video in the price range, but if you are looking to get a Nikon and you're looking into this price range, this is unbeatable. The video just looks so much significantly better on the D5100 than any of the other cheaper Nikons. And also, unlike some DSLRs in the price range, this does have a microphone input. So if you want to get like a Rode mic or something like that, you can do that with the D5100. Also, of course, this does have adjustable audio levels. You can change it between auto, low, medium, and high, which isn't necessarily as detailed and controllable as some of the Canon functions, but it's definitely good to have. And of course, one of the other things that I really like about the D5100 is, for the price range, it has a pretty decent burst rate. And that's 4 frames per second, which doesn't sound like all that much, especially if you use any pro cameras. But, for the price range, I find it's more than enough. I was taking pictures of whales in nature, and they only put their tails out of the water for just a brief moment. And I found that 4 frames per second was enough to capture that moment and get the pictures of these beautiful whales in nature. So even though it doesn't necessarily sound like that much, having these 4 frames per second is definitely noticeably better, significantly better than some of the 3 frames per second and other such performance you'll find on some of the cheaper Canon DSLRs. Alright, so that is the D5100. If you're looking into getting a Nikon DSLR in that price range, this is the one I definitely recommend. And now let's take a look at some sample shots.